And welcome, everyone. Time for Brain Swap again. Glad to have you all here.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, what are we talking about today?
Drinking.
Thank you. Oh, that's our topic. Good. So today we're talking about, and turn that down if you would.
Yeah. Sure.
Today we're talking about drinking in anime, not just drinking liquids, but drinking alcoholic beverages specifically in anime, which is kind of an unusual thing.
There we go.
We're talking about how drinking is actually done and represented in anime.
Well, you start with a cup, lift it up.
It's a little bit different than that. So we've got that aspect. So there's it's interesting because you see drinking represented a little differently than you do it over here in the West.
And in the West, if you're drunk in public, it's sort of the big shame.
Yeah. Yeah. In anime, it's treated more lightheartedly, wouldn't you say?
Sort of humorous.
Yeah.
People don't drink just because they're depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Like on some of the cop shows or things like that. They drink to celebrate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't recall seeing a lot of drinking, just because you're depressed. But you do see a lot of coworkers out drinking
all the time.
Yeah.
It seems like when there's something going on, there's coworkers will get together. The boss is going drinking, so I got to go drinking. And I got to keep up with him. And then everybody gets blottoed by the end of the night. And they kind of vent their frustrations or whatever and say whatever.
Yeah. We saw that in Shirobako, definitely. A couple other anime I'm sure that it shows up in. It does seem to be a common sort of Japanese cultural thing to go out drinking with your coworkers. And it's also interesting that it's considered kind of okay to say things you wouldn't necessarily say at work. Kind of a safe space.
The safe space, the freedom, the liberty to actually be more of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's still some expectations as well.
Yeah,
I've seen some anime where college students will go out. And
sure,
colleagues, young career folks.
Yep. And it should be pointed out that the legal age for drinking is 20 in Japan.
20, so not 21.
No.
A little bit earlier.
But still, college age, roughly.
I seem to remember some vending machines when I was living in Asia where you could go out and buy beer.
Huh. And I'm sure that they verify your age.
You're 21, right? Okay, you can get it, right?
So there's definitely that you can you can get alcohol kind of anywhere you want in that sense, and it's not going to check your age. But to that point, there seems to be less focus on that in Japan, I would say.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be as much of the taboo as it is here. So I guess it has less of an appeal.
Well, and as we were saying, one of the things is that there's so much less car traffic. You're not going to be necessarily driving home.
The teenager with a car is kind of an exception to the rule. Yeah,
it's very true. So I think it's less of a public danger, if you will, than it is over here.
So much public transportation. Just don't fall on the tracks.
And heck, you see that with the adults too. They're not driving to the bar. They took a train, so they just take the train back. Easy enough. But yes, there's definitely that. Liquidus is pointing out in the chat room. There's a scene in the first Tenchi OVA where they're getting drunk. Aika and Ryoko are getting drunk and catfighting the entire time and just downing sake. We should point that out, actually. So if you're watching anime and you see characters with a small, usually like a little porcelain bottle or something like that, and they're pouring into these little dishes,
little cups, little dishes,
and they're drinking that. Yeah, that's not water.
Why would they do that with water?
That is sake. They are drinking sake. And what is sake?
Rice wine, which is interesting that they're drinking sake. It seems more pervasive than beer or hard liquors.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it quite a bit in anime.
Yeah. And I'm sure part of that is also cultural. You know, it's one of those things where if you're going to show drinking, and you might as well show something that is a traditional Japanese thing as opposed to a beer, which kind of anyone might drink. It's a little more fun to show sake.
Yeah, it has its own sort of tradition that goes with it. There's the warm sake, the cold sake.
Yeah. And of course, anything pre 1850s, you're only going to see sake. Nothing much else around. Although Japan got beer and whiskey pretty early. I mean, as soon as they opened up to the West, suddenly they were making it.
Imagine that first import there.
Yeah.
Whoa. What is this fire?
Yeah. More of this, please. And of course, then we should also point out, while the Japanese were cut off from the rest of society, things still made their way in. So people knew what whiskey was. They knew what that fire water was. So once it was actually available, there had been whispers and rumors of these. And now that you actually get it, now there's a market. That definitely helps. So yeah, it's a big thing. And something we were talking about before the show, that it's kind of interesting that you see sake so often, but you don't see beer drinking as much.
Yeah. Did I see a birthday run through the chat room there?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah.
And you got me thinking about the sake. The sake bottles. Quite often we'll see big blue clear bottles that are being carried around, and they look like water, but those are not. But sometimes they end up translated as water.
Yeah.
For the U.S. audience.
Can be, especially for the kids shows. And you'll see characters who are kind of wacky and walking around kind of unsteady on their feet because they drank too much water. Sure.
Yeah, that's what it was, water.
So yeah, there's that. And then there's, so we were talking about before the show that you see sake so much, but there's plenty of beer being drunk in Japan.
Yeah, I think of that. My first introduction to seeing beer in cartoons was NGE, Captain Katsuragi pulling out her fridge stocked with Yebisu beer. Like, wow, she has a fridge stocked like a college student. There's all this beer in there.
Yeah. It's odd that we rarely see beer or whiskey or wine really drinking in anime, but it is quite as common. But that said, beer in Japan tends to be very light. They have these very light, crisp beers. And one of the reasons we're talking about is that, Japan has hot, humid summers. And what better in a hot, humid summer than a nice, light, crisp beer?
Refreshing.
Exactly. And so the primary goal of beer traditionally in Japan has been to be refreshing and light. And that's Kirin beer and Sapporo beer and a lot of the other ones. That said, there isn't a growing craft beer market in Japan. So there are more and more people making more complex beers, making porters and all sorts of stuff. So that is changing somewhat in Japan, but it's a very different kind of approach than you get in some other countries like in Europe, where they favor body and kind of flavor complexity.
It's interesting that here in the U.S. the microbreweries have just sprouted up all over the past few years, and the focus on hoppy flavored beers rather than malty flavored beers. I wonder if that's going to at some point translate into the Japanese market, or if they'll stay with the lighter beers.
Yeah, it is happening. People are developing an appreciation, but it's much like it was over here in America. Remember, 10, 20 years ago, just everyone drank Budweiser.
Yeah. There's like 3 different beers, and now the options are just so plentiful.
Yeah.
There's a beer for every taste.
and it took a long time for folks to imagine drinking a non-light beer. But now that the options are available, folks are trying them out and realizing, oh yeah, it's worth trying. Nothing wrong with that. So we're talking about characters who famously drink alcohol in anime.
Yes.
So you mentioned Captain Katsuragi.
Yes,
definitely one.
With your fridge full of beer
Mhm.
and the penguin.
Yep. And you also mentioned
Let's see.
Ranma.
Ranma. Oh, Ranma. Yes, Ranma. Hapasai he's got his jug of
Mhm.
water.
And we should point that out too. You know, you see character carrying a jug. It's usually not water.
And we were talking about Battleship Yamato.
Yeah.
The doctor. The doctor was quite a lush. He was all the time drinking and upset when his reserves got messed with.
Yep.
So there you see it quite a bit. There's some other things that are a little bit different. Shows like Bebop, you see bar scenes, and those kind of are a little bit different. It's not just somebody drinking or having something traditional. It's more of the traditional bar scene.
Yeah. Same thing with Trigun.
Trigun.
You know, there are bar scenes, but you don't really see folks.
Whiskey, and you know, you see different scenarios that play out that would ordinarily take place in a bar.
Yeah.
And that style, I mean, it's a particular style that you don't see in American kids shows.
Yeah, no.
And so for a more mature audience, but that's about the only place that I've seen hard whiskey, and it's in the bar, where with something like plum wine, sometimes in the cherry blossom festivals, you'll see people spread out their blankets and have their interaction with their friends and have a glass of or a bottle of plum wine as a traditional thing. And I can't remember the name of the anime, but I remember one where a girl was trying out her first plum wine during one of these events. And of course it went to her head because she was not used to it. And, I forgot if she confessed her love for somebody or did something. As the traditional things go, that was one of the things that I remembered about traditional drinking.
Well, and that gets to another important point, is that drinking traditionally in Japan has been a more social occasion. You know, you're drinking with your family, you're going out to drink with friends. You know, you generally don't open a bottle of sake and just drink the entire thing yourself, although you can, especially if you're single. But, you know, if someone will come over to your house, you offer them sake and you're both drinking from that same bottle. So it has that communal aspect to it, or at least, you know, paired drinking of something, which I think is also one of the reasons why you don't see as much people just kind of getting drunk on something, because there's always somebody else there to kind of pull you back.
There's a few cases where I remember seeing characters get drunk in anime. I think some of the teachers in
Is it Azumanga?
Yeah. I think I seem to remember. And maybe,
yes.
A
And
few,
on vacation.
few other shows like that have the slice of life and the teachers trying to make her living. Of course, she's broke and living on the edge, and a chance to.
Yeah. Of course, the teachers in who is the one who's always Yukari Sensei? He's not exactly a model teacher. Such his life. It's interesting because you build up a high alcohol tolerance in Japan because you are going out drinking with your boss so often.
Yeah,
it kind of is compulsory.
I wonder how that turns out when somebody has a condition where they can't drink. If it's a social stigma, or if it's, well, we understand, but okay, well, they're not in the circle.
Yeah, you wonder, and it's certainly something that we don't see addressed as often, you know, in these sorts of situations. Is what happens if someone's a teetotaler and they just don't drink?
Yeah,
that's an issue. Then the reason there's not so much drunken master style fighting, and I have seen both of those movies actually I've seen Drunken Tai Chi. It's a whole other thing. It's I think part of it is because they've all seen all those movies. Over here, most of us haven't seen Legend of Drunken Master, but over there they all have. So throwing that in the anime, it's like, oh, well, we all know where we got that from. I mean, it's an obvious sort of reference.
It's an homage.
Yeah, exactly. It's not stealing, it's homage. But yeah. There's certainly it's certainly done kind of differently.
Kampai.
There we go. So
Salut.
yeah, and just lost my train of thought entirely.
Sorry.
No,
I had to throw
entirely.
the toasts in there because it's interesting because I just it's fun to hear the toasts.
Yeah.
They get to a point where everybody's stressed out over work. They go on their vacation and it's break open a bottle, kampai. We let our stress roll off our backs. We're going to have a drink. We're going to unwind. We're going to forget the stress and cares of whatever crazy job that we were getting ready for, or the comic show, or whatever was going on.
And that's a really interesting thing. You're absolutely right that there's this stress relief to drinking that we don't see as often over here in our representations of drinking. You know, over here, drinking is a way of escaping problems. Whereas over there, it's more of a celebration.
Celebration. Yeah,
exactly. It's one of those things that just is very different that how you represent these things in Japan, and which also ties into that thing where you're, letting a 19-year-old or an 18-year-old have a drink is not as big of a deal as it is over here.
It's funny how they kind of steer kids away from the drinks. Oh no, you're not old enough yet.
No, definitely not.
I think there was another one of those in Azumango Daioh that you mentioned.
Yeah. I think Chio-chan was aiming for.
I'm ready for it. No. and around the holidays, I remember seeing some holiday parties. I want to say Clover, something honey and clover, or something like that. Ramen is an interesting beverage.
Ramune, yes.
Ramune. I always call it ramen, which is like no, that's the soup. But ramune, with that little marble in it.
Yep.
And I first saw that on Razafan.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I said, what a strange drink. I wonder if it's real. And when I saw a real bottle of it for the first time, I was amazed. I had to buy it. and they have so many different flavors.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty easy to find these days over here in America.
Yeah.
I think Giant carries it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not that hard to find these days. Non-alcoholic, we should point out.
Yeah, it's not alcoholic, so you can have it. And
exactly.
They have so many different flavors from like just regular water to like watermelon, cherry, orange, lychee. I had some lychee.
Yeah,
I love lychee flavor.
Good.
Or lychee. Or
yeah. But yeah, there's a very different kind of approach to things. Oh, Otaku no Video. Otaku no Video also has drinking in it. I remember, because they're all getting together to celebrate their work. But yeah, it's definitely different.
Otaku getting together and drinking. This character's more moe. No, this character. I could just picture that, and sometimes at a convention late at night, you'll see people will indulge in a few adult beverages, but I haven't really seen too much argument. More of a sort of humorous stuff, but people can get passionate about their characters. Yeah,
thankfully, folks tend to retire to their rooms for that at conventions. And if you can do that, please do so. Yeah, we don't need that on the convention floor, especially when there are normals around.
Yeah, we don't want to give a bad impression to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty much regulated to the rooms. So.
Yeah, it better be. Is there drinking in Haruhi Suzumiya? I seem to remember
Suzumiya.
There's at some point when they grab alcohol, or they try to grab alcohol or something. I don't know. It's just
I'm trying to remember that.
Yeah, I don't know. And of course, they'd all be underage. But I seem to recall there was something maybe in season 2. I'm forgetting.
I haven't seen season 2. I've got to see season 2.
Yeah, that'll happen. But yeah, it's Mikuru gets drunk. That's right.
When? What happens?
I'm forgetting what happens, but yes, she does. So yeah, there's. It's also funny how you'll get anime, how the sort of the visual symbols of drunkenness in Japan. Things like people mention the flushed face.
Oh, and it's interesting. There's a sort of a genetic predisposition in many Asians that causes that red flushness. So some of them just can't drink alcohol because of that reaction, and they'll just get really flushed, and more so than just from average drinking. Average drinking, when you drink, the alcohol opens up your cardiovascular. So you feel warm, but it's because you're losing heat because your circulation. So you'll get a little bit of flushed, but people who have the genetic predisposition get like red flushed. It's like, okay, you can't drink.
And you're right, Desert. It's second season when Haruhi gets Mikuru drunk for a scene.
That must be why.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. We covered earlier, the drinking age in Japan is 20, so Mikuru would definitely be underage. Definitely. Well, I mean, in terms of her visual age, I don't know if physically she is, but that's a whole nother question.
Now, somebody mentioned that there's references to alcohol, but not as much as drugs.
Yeah.
And there are references, but not as many as alcohol because of the illegal nature. I think it makes it a topic that the creators would probably steer clear of. But you can see things like that in Cowboy Bebop, where they have a drug called Red Eye, and we saw that in the one with what was it called? X, not X. It was called the one where the one episode of I'm having a brain fart. Sorry, it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
But there's a few episodes. The one where they were enslaving the people by getting them into the drug. It was like a red thing. No, not Cowboy Bebop. This was in the one.
I'm not remembering.
What was? Oh, sorry. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
What was the one we did with the Flash of Light?
Oh, Boogie Pop Phantom.
Boogie Pop Phantom.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you remember the episode? There was an episode where a drug was being referenced.
Yeah.
So most of their references to that kind of thing have been the negative aspect of it. So they're supporting the cultural.
Well, and also, recognize that, so much of anime is aimed at a younger audience. And so it's not to anyone's benefit to talk about drug culture. The show aimed at 12-year-olds. Man, it's just no.
Yeah. So it's best to show it in a negative light for the younger folks or not at all.
Yeah. So it's easier to just steer clear of it. So they normally do.
But there's still a few references here and there. So,
it comes up. Yeah. But it's really more of and drinking has such a well-established social sort of meaning in Japanese culture that is something you can very easily reference in any story because it's there. Everyone knows it's there. There's no shame in there being that.
There may be some mushrooms that pop up from time to time, which are probably a little bit more suspect, but that's about as far as the implications would even get near to.
Yeah, so. And even there, it's usually pretty cartoony.
Yeah,
there's not really people aren't addressing it really, really closely.
But drinking, now there,
drinking is certainly there and certainly available. And it also gets to the fact that alcohol is just so ubiquitous, like we were saying about the vending machines, where you can kind of get it anywhere, and so it's easy. And there's a wide variety. And one of the nice things about sake is you can have a wide variety of flavors and then approach it to it kind of like wine. So it's a whole world that you can explore.
I think this one is plum wine. Plum.
Yeah. Great stuff. So yeah, that's kind of it. And then of course there's going to a hot spring.
Oh,
and we mentioned the Tenchi Moyo thing, where there are you go to a hot spring and then you can you drink a little bit. And of course, when you're in a hot spring, that's going to affect the alcohol in your body a little differently.
You've already got the open pores and good circulation, so it's going to go all through you.
Oh yeah, you got to be very careful about that actually. But yeah, so that's drinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we covered that pretty full. Oh, we should mention some anime where this shows up. So probably the big one would be Bartender.
Bartender. Now that's not as well known anime as some others that we've mentioned tonight. What is Bartender?
Bartender is an anime about a bartender.
Oh, spoiler!
Yes, who solves people's problems through making them the perfect drink.
The perfect drink.
Yes.
A whole anime about this.
Yes. In every episode, somebody comes in with a problem and the bartender hears them out and you get the whole explanation of their life and the problems they're facing. And then he says, I know what you need. And he prepares a certain drink and they show you how to prepare the drink. So if you want to make it, which is kind of nice.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's a whole thing about making
anime where I learn how to do something.
Yeah,
I like those.
Pretty nice.
Yeah.
So it came out, I think, about 10 years ago or so.
So they're definitely not for the kids.
No.
There's an argument for saying not all anime is for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly true. And then, Durarara. You got someone who seems like a bartender.
Yeah.
Bartenderish outfit there. But so Bartenders, I think, is the only one that I know of that focuses on alcohol and alcoholic beverages. They show up in other things. Obviously, the food shows talk about that a lot, food wars and such.
I think of all the parodies of the video game Tapper. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's an aside.
So, yeah, that's, I think, the only one where that's like really focused on. And I can't even think of anime that really talk about things like, actually, there is one that's about wine. There's a wine focused anime, which I'm forgetting the name of.
Oh, wow.
But there's one of the folks who are into drinking wine, and they talk about the differences. But other than that, I think
it sounds like it would be fun to watch. Sure. But I'd have to have a glass of wine with it.
So yeah, I think that covers it for us for this evening. So I want to thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hope you'll join us next week for an Ask Us Anything.
Anything?
Yeah. So we will be on tap to answer your questions. Folks who have, we're two folks who watched a lot of anime and exposure to a lot of aspects of manga, Japanese culture, and so on. Drops of God. That's the one. Thank you.
Oh, I've got to see that.
Drops of God.
Drops of God.
Might be manga, not anime. They may not have done a manga. I'm not sure. So yeah. So next week, ask us anything and we will answer it. Well, actually, I take that back. Ask us anything. We won't necessarily
give you the answer you want.
Right. We won't necessarily give you the answer. There will be an answer of some form. When we'll see.
You can ask me anything.
Right.
I will answer something that may be completely different.
Exactly. All right. Thank you all very much, guys, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Bye.